everyone. Welcome to the Film for Fans podcast, the podcast from movie fans for movie fans. I'm your host, Ryan Dunlevy. That is my co-host, Rob Dunham.
How's it going, everybody?
Hopefully, all are doing well on this evening. We are recording in the evening, and we have an excellent, well-packed out show for you. We will get to some of the box office things. We will talk a little bit about movies coming out here this coming weekend. And on top of that, we will do a discussion in honor of this Father's Day this past week about the dynamic between fathers and sons in movies and what makes a good, compelling father-son dynamic. And we'll give some examples along the way. All right, let us get started with the box office from last week. Overall, good week at the box office. The box office was up 46% from the previous week. The number one movie in its debut weekend was, of course, How to Train Your Dragon. $84.6 million for How to Train Your Dragon. Number two was Lilo and Stitch, giving up its several week run at the top spot of the box office. It did $15.7 million in its fourth week in the box office. Lilo and Stitch has done $366 million at the box office. So massive success there. Number three was another debut, The Materialists. Did $12 million, which is pretty solid for a rom-com from an indie studio. Number four was Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, did $10.5 million. That movie has done $166 million domestically. And number five, rounding out the box office, was Ballerina, did $9.7 million. Now, this was its second week and had a 60% drop off from week one to week two. So that's a little high. So that was not a great second week for Ballerina on that front. But that has a 2-week total of $42.1 million. Lot to potentially talk about there. What stands out for you?
I guess the Ballerina drop is the big thing for me. I think they're really wondering, like, will the John Wick franchise have legs without John Wick? And I mean, it hasn't done horribly.
No,
but I'm guessing they probably would have hoped for a little bit more over the first 2 weeks.
yeah, and it's hard to assess what to make of that. I still have not gotten to. There's a way scheduled work. I still have not gotten to see Ballerina. So that
I actually saw it Sunday night.
Nice. That is number one on my agenda for the next week, is to make sure I go and get to see that. But for now, yeah, I think The Materialist pulling in 12 million is interesting to me, because that's kind of a sort of traditional rom-com with Dakota Johnson and Chris Evans. Is that Chris Evans?
Yeah.
Chris Evans. And oh, now I'm blanking out on the other guy. I will look that up real quick. But yeah, like basically a love triangle plot there. And so that's actually pretty good for that type of movie. And it's honestly been a while since we've seen that type of movie come out. Let's see, who's the third one? Pedro Pascal. Yeah, Pedro Pascal. So it had a good cast to it. And it was kind of a novelty to those movies at this point. Lilo and Stitch having a 3-week number one run was not that surprising. What do you make of the number for How to Train Your Dragon at 84 million?
Pretty good, I would think. I think they'd be pretty happy with that. For a live action version of a movie, I mean, we did see Lilo and Stitch like destroy that number.
Yeah.
Opening week. But I think there's probably more of an audience for Lilo and Stitch than there is for How to Train Your Dragon. But I kind of think that How to Train Your Dragon might lend itself well to like live action kind of story, because I mean, the book series itself, it's grounded enough that I could, like, when I read the book, I kind of felt like it was live action more than animated. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that they were able to make a good live action movie out of it. I haven't seen it yet, but I do want to see that. one because I like the animated movie quite a bit.
Nice. Yeah, I would have thought they would probably be hoping for closer to 100 million on How to Train Your Dragon. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering if they might not be slightly disappointed on it, but we'll see what kind of legs it has because there was enough people that still went to see Lilo and Stitch that maybe it'll pick up some audience in the coming week here. Any other comments on that?
Not really.
Okay. Two movies of note come out this coming weekend. The first one being 28 years later. The horror genre sees the return of the cast and crew. Well, the cast, or I wouldn't say the cast, the duo, I should say, of now I'm blanking out on their names. Alex Garland and
Danny.
Danny Boyle. Alex Garland, Danny Boyle, writer director, who did the first several movies of this one, and the the plot here is 28 years later, a story set in a world created 28 years later, a story created in the world set by 28 days later. It's been almost 3 decades since the rage virus escaped the biological weapons lab, and now, still in a ruthlessly enforced quarantine, some have found ways to exist amid the infected. One such group of survivors lives on a small island connected to the mainland by a single heavily defended causeway. When one of the groups leaves the island on a mission into the dark heart of the mainland, he discovers secrets, wonders, and horrors that have mutated not only the infected, but other survivors as well. This one stars Jodie Comer, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Jack O'Connell, Ray Fiennes, amongst others. Cillian Murphy is in this one as well. So you get the horror entrant, and then you have another kids animated film, and that's Elio. Elio opens on Friday, and it is rated PG. And for centuries, people have called out to the universe looking for answers. In Disney and Pixar's all-new movie Elio, the universe calls back. The original film introduces Ilio, an underdog with an active imagination who finds himself inadvertently beamed up to the Communiverse, an interplanetary organization with representatives from galaxies far and wide. He is mistaken as Earth's ambassador to the rest of the universe and is unprepared for the kind of pressure that he finds.
Mm.
So the main people starring in this, Jonas Kimbrib is plays Elio, but also Zoe Saldana is in this one, Brad Garrett as well. So there's just a couple of names for you, and that's Elio. I know which one of these appeals to you. So do you have any thoughts on 28 years later?
Yeah, I mean, I over the last couple of weeks, I've watched 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later, um, and Cillian Murphy is a main component of that series. So I'm really excited to see what they're doing with his character in this movie, how he fits in to everything because he hasn't really been featured in the trailers at all, and the trailers have been like really good.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, masterful trailers for
yeah,
this.
I'm like really excited about the direction the movie's going in. One of the things I'll say about the series is that, especially with the first one, less so with the second one because they were able to do more with it.
Mhm.
Um, but the first one, especially, you could tell it didn't have a huge budget. The storyline is really, really good, but there's a lot. Like I feel like there could have been a lot more to it if they would have had more of a budget. If they had been able to do more of what they wanted to do, what they envisioned for the movie. Um, this one feels like, from watching the trailers, that it's like they're at a point now where they can really throw the resources behind it to make the kind of movie they want to make
For sure.
about this virus and the people involved. Um, and I think the performances in the first two movies were great. It's just like sometimes things can feel really dated, or like
Mhm.
it's really obvious that they didn't have a lot to work with. Um, but it doesn't mean it's a bad movie. It just means, maybe there could have been a little bit more if they had and even technology, just changes in technology and how things are shot, and just um, general movie making practice over time, I think influences how you feel about a movie in that way too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I'll absolutely be seeing this. I think that I'll probably at some point, not I won't be seeing it probably opening weekend because the people I watch scary movies with are going to be away on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so probably the week after that, I'll be doing like Megan 2.0 and 28 years later double feature someday.
Nice.
So
Um, it'll be interesting too because Alex Garland returns to the writing room after having more success as a director, having directed a bunch of films himself. Danny Boyle has continued directing excellent films as well. So this really is a powerhouse team, and it'll be interesting to see them come back to this universe with greater level of experience and, as you said, budget as well. If the trailers are any indication, they've put a lot behind this film.
yeah, and there's like no doubt that them working together on the other movies, uh, like propelled slash catapulted both of them uh, onto bigger and better things. So to see them come back together is kind of like a band breaking off and doing solo things and then reuniting. And the band that I think of the most in that sense would be like Blink 182
Hmm.
because they were a pretty good band. I mean, some would say like one of the best punk bands, but then they all split off and did their own thing. There was Plus 44, Travis Barker, Angels and Airwaves
Yeah,
was a band, Boxcar Racer was a band. Like all these things were separate things, and then they came back together. And when they came back together, the thing that I thought was the coolest was you could hear the influences from all their side projects
sure.
now in the music, and to me, it made it better music. So
I
I'm
agree.
kind of looking and feeling like the same kind of thing with this team up here for this movie.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great team for sure. I want Alex Garland to go back to doing a little more sci-fi though, because I think he's got a real niche for there.
Yeah,
He did a few sci-fi ones that were really good, and then he ventured back into the horror genre, and I want to see him step back out into sci-fi.
yeah, yeah. The best is like the meeting point between the sci-fi and the horror, like Annihilation.
Yeah, Annihilation is
That's
the
absolutely the wheelhouse for Alex Garland, I think.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, well, that is the box office update for this past week, and what's coming up. Now we'll move to our discussion, and we've got a good one for you here. Um, Given the fact that it was Father's Day this past week and we did not have an episode due to crazy conflicting schedules, I thought it would be fun to examine what is it that makes a compelling father-son dynamic in films and in movies. It is a an often hit on thing, and it is a literary technique as well, and you see this a lot in TV shows and movies and books, the father son dynamic. And so I thought it'd be fun to explore a little bit about what makes a compelling father son dynamic in a movie, and we can give some examples. And now when I say compelling, that doesn't mean like it's a good father son relationship. It could be a bad father son relationship. It could be somewhere in between. But what makes it compelling? What helps it drive the emotional bandwidth of the story and help drive stories forward in movies? So where do you want to start with this one?
I think I want to start with the question, Anakin Skywalker, great father or best father ever? Um, and I'd like to lay out my argument for why this is a compelling father-son relationship.
I see.
Uh, First of all, like the thing that makes a great father-son relationship is a father willing to do anything for his son. And in this particular scenario, anything means destroying the entire universe. Um, One could argue that some innocent people might have died along the way. But when you're literally doing anything you can to get to your son, like that's excellent, excellent parenting. I have to say that another thing that leads to compelling and maybe not the best form of father and son dynamics in movies is when a father attempts to remove distractions or bad influences from their sons' lives,
Okay.
like freezing them out, like literally freezing Han Solo in carbonite to get them out of Luke's life. Like how could you be a better father? I have more.
I'm
So
sure.
another thing that's great about fathers and sons is that they help each other explore different aspects of their world and we get to learn and try new things. You see this in all kinds of TV shows and movies. And I mean, what better example of that is there than literally cutting your son's hand off so that you can explore the world of robotics? I mean, like, what a sacrifice he made to just help his son become a better version of himself. And
I
there's nothing
know. I
I
mean,
can do. I'd like to rest my case, Your Honor.
it is quite the case for sure. I think the jury may need to deliberate on that one a little bit, but I'm sure they'll be back soon rendering a verdict on that
But
one.
yeah, but all joking aside, like a lot of those things I think are very important things when it comes to dynamics between a father and son. Like how much are you willing to sacrifice for your son, or how much are you willing to give up for your son? How much are you willing to set aside your own pursuit to pursue their happiness?
Yeah.
Another father son movie. I uh, I have a lot more examples of things I'm thinking of, but where do you start off your thought process with this?
So I think there's a couple of dynamics that I kind of honed in on that really work. And I think I'll start with, since you mentioned this movie already, I'll start with I think one of them is the desire for approval or love, that kind of longing for the father's approval, longing for that relationship, longing for that loving relationship. Um, and that kind of, we see it on the positive aspect with Chris Gardner in The Pursuit of Happiness, how he continually gives his son the support and the love and the care he needs. And his desire to make life better for his son drives the narrative throughout the story. It drives the emotional element. It gives a humanity to his character. Um, if you just simply took that film and you just made it about a down on your luck guy, it's still a good film, but it's not nearly as compelling as when you add in the fact that he's struggling with homelessness with his small son, and all of the things that he's sacrificing and working for is not just for him and to rise himself up, but for his son. And so his desire to love and approve of his son and give his son a better future is a really, really positive father dynamic along those lines of, the desire for love and approval. And you kind of see the reverse end of that with like Field of Dreams, and the father son dynamic is the core and the heart of that film, and it's longing for something that he never got with his father. Longing for that desire, that relationship, that love and approval is what drives him the entire film. He might think it's something else, it manifests it's something else through various points, but it always is about coming back to that relationship with his father. And the payoff for that in Field of Dreams is really, really amazing. Like the payoff when that moment and that desire is actually fulfilled, that moment of love is actually fulfilled. It is powerful in its making.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to the what is the primary motivator of the father figure in that relationship? Is it selflessness or selfishness?
Yeah.
And I think of a bad example or an example of a bad dynamic when it comes to that particular spectrum is Ego and Star Lord in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Okay.
Because like he's saying that he wants to give his son the whole universe basically, but it's all out of his own selfish desire to be like perpetuating his legacy. It doesn't really have anything to do with his son.
Mm-hmm.
um, so just because a father like wants to invest in his son's life doesn't necessarily mean that it's for the most selfless reasons or for a positive reason. Sometimes it's just about making themselves look better And I guess when you're a planet like creating God, then I guess that it's understandable that your motives might be skewed a little bit. But I really I like that movie quite a bit, and I like Kurt Russell and Chris Pratt's dynamic in those characters, and the way the story develops, and you find out more and more about what the actual motivations of the character are. Because at first it seems like this is the best thing ever, and then slowly you start to realize this is the worst thing ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Along those same lines, the idea of unmet expectations and generational pressure have been common motifs to explore the father-son relationship and that kind of father-son dynamic. I think this may be best embodied by the film Dead Poets Society, where you have Neil wants to pursue acting. He shows a talent for acting, wants to pursue it, and his father wants a very different life for him. And you have this culmination, like this wrestling that Neil does in this film of, do I do what I want, or do I do as I've been conditioned my entire life to follow in my father's footsteps, to listen and to obey my father? And that pressure can be harsh, and that pressure can be unrelenting. And even though the father wants what he believes is best for his son, there are some twisted dynamics there. And you end up with that kind of crazy, horrible reversal where Neil has this life-changing acting performance. His father is there in the crowd, and you think it's going to be one thing. You think it's going to be his father accepting him, and then it turns into something else where his father is basically wants to remove him from school and like be done with that entirely, which results then in the tragic death of Neil. Then, so you see the dynamics of that unmet expectation, and how that dynamic can go wrong when fathers and sons want different things for themselves.
Yeah. Piggybacking off that, but looking at a slightly different angle, one thing I was thinking of was a repeated dynamic we see in all kinds of storytelling, but especially in movies, is what happens when the father is removed from the son's life at an early age. Mm-hmm. And then they're left to fend for themselves as they go through life. How do they end up living?
Yeah.
What choices do they make based on what they thought their father taught them, or their father actually did teach them? And if there's a reunion of sorts in these kind of movies, like what is where does it land? Mm-hmm. And the first movie that came to my mind with this is a movie that we've talked about before on this podcast because we both like it, but a lot of people didn't like it. The reason being that it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. The movie Ad Astra.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because Brad Pitt's character spends his entire life trying to go to space. And like the main motivation for him trying to go to space is he wants to explore, but like deep down he wants to find his dad.
Yeah.
And he ends up finding his dad.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't go, I think, how he hoped it would go.
Yeah.
Like essentially like, didn't you miss us? Like,
yeah.
Where were you? And his dad's like, I've just been here. Like,
yeah.
So it's interesting how he could be so driven to be like his father, thinking that like his father was something more than he ended up being. Mm-hmm. Or maybe just being alone for so long and so isolated, he became something different than what he was when he left.
Yeah. And I think you see one of the other ways this plays out is along those lines where the father's removed early in life, is you see how it affects the development of the child into the man, the son into the man. A classic example of this would be The Lion King.
Yeah, that was going to be my good example.
Yeah, The Lion King, because in that instance, you see the father is removed very early on. and the kid ends up not knowing how to fight and goes through a long extended adolescence where he is kind of like isolating himself away from the world, away from the conflict. And it takes his father returning in the form of a vision to like get him back on track, to move him towards manhood. And we see that a lot, dynamic play out a lot.
Yeah, I think the thing that makes that a positive dynamic on the spectrum is that the time that the father spent with his son was very intentional and like very focused on
Mm-hmm.
the pride he should have in who he is and who they are, and the hope that he should have based on those things. And so when Simba grows up, he has a lot of very positive memories in a short amount of time to look back on,
Yeah.
instead of just like, my dad just left. Now he does think that he's responsible for his dad's death, which can be a little rough.
Yeah.
But I think it drives him to want to be better, be the best version of himself he can be.
Mm-hmm.
I think another theme I think of is, and I mentioned this a little bit in the Star Wars thing jokingly, but the story of a father doing whatever needs to happen to protect, save, help his son,
Mm-hmm.
which we see in Finding Nemo, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about another animated movie. Like,
Yeah.
he literally goes across the ocean to try and save his son, and into uncharted waters for him, strange territory that he had no experience with, meeting new people that he had no idea existed, learning how to talk to whales, learning how to go through a jellyfish field, learning how to swim with sea turtles. I like
Mm-hmm.
Finding Nemo. Sorry, but that is a theme that's in a lot of stories too, about just the persistence of father. I know it's not a son, but I also think of Taken when it
Mm.
comes to just the father willing to do anything to protect his child.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I also thought of like The Road,
Mm.
one of those where, teaching the father, teaching the son, or even like early on in the Dune, the father son relationship there, and the influence that he has on Paul Atreides early in that film, uh, carries over throughout much of the rest of the story. One last thing, I think, just like I think the general like conflict and resolution aspect of father son relationships can be really fun and really interesting and compelling, as you see that like fathers and sons who are different from each other having to be in the same room together and battling it out a little bit. um, and those are kind of fun. I think I saw it this past weekend, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade,
Mm-hmm.
and the dynamic of that father son dynamic. That's the heart of the film that drives the film forward, is this kind of back and forth relationship between father and son, that kind of semi estranged but obviously both care for each other, and the vastly different personalities as they get flung on these adventures together, and that idea of just the differences of personality and traits and conflict really drives that film. And I think that can be a really good source of a solid father son dynamic. All right, you got anything else on that?
I don't. It's a good discussion.
Yeah. I think we hit up some good things there on the
Yeah, I
father
think that
son relationship.
I will say, like, overall, the cool thing about a discussion or thought process around an issue like this is it doesn't really take a whole lot of time to think of examples
No.
for this, because it is a compelling, oft repeated theme in a lot of storytelling, like we said, in movies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because people will always connect to wanting to be like or wanting to not be like their
Mm-hmm.
father, depending on how that relationship was in their life.
And I just realized I can't let this discussion go without talking about the father son dynamic that drives Inception.
Mm,
Like
yeah,
that entire story and saga is driven by the father son dynamic. Um, between Cillian Murphy's character and his father, like the whole plot of like trying to resolve this conflict between father and son in a way where they're using Inception in order to heal the relationship between these two to get the strategy go forward. And it really takes a long look at the complexities of the father son relationship in a unique and interesting way.
yeah. The whole world is built on it,
Yes.
which I think is a metaphor for just like a lot of people's experiences and lives.
Yeah. All right, we can move on now. We'll close out the show with our watch list movies we've watched over the past couple of weeks. Rob, what'd you watch?
So I did watch Ballerina, like I said. I thought it was quite good. It definitely lived up to the things I like about the John Wick franchise, which are insanely well choreographed action sequences. Um, there's some very, I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but there's some very interesting and new uses for flamethrowers, figure skates, and katanas in this movie. That I think
Nice.
you'll also. So we did know from the trailers that Keanu Reeves is in the movie. He's not in the movie a lot, but he does have an important part, and I liked the part that he played in the movie. And it does. The cool thing too is that it ties into the other movies
Excellent.
with his appearance. So overall, I thought it was a great continuation of the series, and would not mind seeing another movie about the character. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but I would certainly go watch another one.
Excellent. Um, I already talked about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. It's just a classic story. It's so good. It's just such a compelling movie. I went and saw it with my dad on Father's Day weekend, so that was fun experience. I watched The Adjustment Bureau. Hadn't watched that one in a while. I like that. It's just a compelling, unique story that has some really interesting dynamics. There's great chemistry with Emily Blunt and Matt Damon on there. Anthony Mackie is really good in that kind of. That's where he thrives, is in that kind of support side, almost sidekick role. But I do love the cinematography and how it's shot and some of the dynamics they create, and just the interesting sci-fi premise to it is really fun. So I'll definitely recommend The Adjustment Bureau if you haven't checked that one out. And we saw the Phoenician Scheme. I don't think we got a chance to talk about the
Yeah,
Phoenician Scheme on
that
the
is true.
podcast.
So I said this after we watched it and we talked afterwards, that I feel like I need to see the movie again.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen the movie again yet, and I'm guessing I might not see it again until it comes out
Yeah.
on video. But in a lot of ways, it was very much like all of Wes Anderson's movies, but in some ways, to me, it felt very different. It felt like it was very much more focused on emotional interdynamics. It felt like a very close movie, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Less so about. I felt like it was less about the aesthetics of things than a lot of his other movies are, and more focused on the individual characters and their struggles and frustrations, and trying to work out their dynamics as they figured out who they were to each other and where this was going. Storyline I felt could have been a little tighter, but I didn't not like the movie. Like, I like the movie still.
Yeah.
I don't think it's like high up on my list of Wes Anderson movies, but I did enjoy it.
I think my initial reaction to it was I classified it as like upper mid tier Wes Anderson. So I think it's not one of his best films, but it's not like blah either. And yeah, second viewing would certainly help on that front. I think he, in terms of the dialogue, I think the dialogue was interesting because I think there were lots of words and lots of compelling Like they would hit on something and then they'd quickly move on to something else, and then hit on something and quickly move on to something else. So I think some of what he was trying to say gets lost in the shuffle a little bit in this film, but I would need to see it again as well. But solid film
Yeah,
overall.
I liked Asteroid City better, which is the one before this.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well.
But I definitely thought it was pretty good. So
Excellent. All right. Well, that is the show, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for checking out Film for Fans. Make sure you visit filmforfans.com, like, subscribe, tell your friends, do all that good stuff. Until next time, enjoy the movies.